A massive shift ripples through the world of Formula One as Mercedes makes a remarkable comeback, igniting hopes for a spectacular battle. With a stunning performance at the Spanish GP, Hamilton and Russell claimed the coveted P2 and P3 spots. They trailed closely behind the indomitable Verstappen, who claimed victory. So, are Mercedes truly back and hurtling in the right direction? Amidst the mounting excitement, Red Bull's boss remains seemingly unperturbed by their formidable resurgence. Join us as we plunge into the heart of the electrifying clash between Mercedes and Red Bull, where dreams collide and rivalries ignite, leaving us on the edge of our seats. Mercedes is feeling positive about its chances for the remainder of the season after making significant improvements to its W14 car. These upgrades play a key role in helping Lewis Hamilton and George Russell achieve a double podium finish at the recent Spanish Grand Prix. Earlier in the season, Mercedes faced challenges as they realized that their initial zero-pod concept was not performing well enough to compete with Red Bull. Consequently, they had to make changes to their design. Although Mercedes showed impressive progress in Barcelona, Christian Horner believes that we should consider their recent performance in the larger context of the season. He suggests that Mercedes may have expended a significant portion of their budget on the recent car changes. He also points out that in the Spanish Grand Prix, Hamilton finished 24 seconds behind Verstappen, which is similar to Alonso finishing 26 seconds behind Perez in Bahrain. This indicates that the gap between Mercedes and their rivals is not closing much. When asked about the progress Mercedes has made, Horner acknowledges that they have improved. However, he mentions that Mercedes essentially introduced a different version of their car, using a significant part of their development budget. He also notes that the time difference between Mercedes and Red Bull at the end of the race is similar to what it was in Bahrain. According to Horner, the order of their teams behind Red Bull seems to change from race to race, with Alonso's performance in Monaco and Mercedes' performance in Spain. He finds it interesting to see how this will unfold in the upcoming races. Horner emphasizes that his team should be praised for their ability to maintain their advantage in Formula One, even though they have only made minor improvements to their RB19 car. He commends his team for their exceptional efficiency and explains that they have made subtle developments to the car since the Bahrain race. On the other hand, other teams have introduced significant upgrades recently. Despite these changes, the performance margin between Red Bull and their competitors has remained largely unchanged since Bahrain. Horner finds this highly encouraging for everyone working in Milton Keynes, as it demonstrates the outstanding work being done by the team. But Horner not only downplayed Mercedes' improvements, he went on to say that he is worried about another team on the grid. Horner says that Aston Martin is a team that Red Bull is paying close attention to after their impressive start to the 2023 F1 season. Aston Martin went through a remarkable transformation over the winter, going from a disappointing 7th place finish in the previous year's championship to becoming Red Bull's closest competitors at the beginning of the season. Fernando Alonso, driving for Aston Martin, has achieved podium finishes on 4 occasions this season, including a 2nd place finish in Monaco, which is the team's best result so far. Despite Mercedes' recent improvement, which allowed them to surpass Aston Martin and take 2nd place in the constructors' standings at the Spanish Grand Prix, Horner still sees Aston Martin as the biggest long-term threat to Red Bull. Horner explains that Red Bull has less wind tunnel time than other teams, so they have to carefully prioritize and balance how they use that limited time. He acknowledges the experience that Fernando Alonso brings to Aston Martin and recognizes that they are still a relatively young team with new members, some of whom were recruited from Red Bull. In Horner's view, Aston Martin is a team that Red Bull is particularly keeping an eye on for the future because they have a strong and promising energy. If Mercedes continues to make significant upgrades, especially with James Allison leading their technical team, they might catch up to Red Bull by the end of the season. It's hard to understand why teams, including Mercedes, would adhere to the budget cap when the penalties for exceeding it are relatively insignificant. By not breaking the budget cap, teams put themselves at a disadvantage. The FIA has been unclear regarding the potential penalties for surpassing the budget cap. They are still figuring out how to handle this new regulation and don't want to create a penalty system that encourages teams to use overspending as a way to balance performance. Currently, the only known precedent is that overspending by €4 million will result in a small fine and a reduction in wind tunnel testing time for the following year, or possibly the year after. Mercedes and other teams will carefully analyze the cost and benefits of utilizing this margin. It's possible that they, as well as Ferrari, McLaren, Aston Martin and Alpine, might decide that focusing on their concept now and accepting the penalty later will bring more advantages. It's worth noting that purposely overspending does not result in additional punishment, as a judgment on Red Bull and Williams last year clearly indicate that intent is not taken into account when it comes to financial regulations violations. Ultimately, the FIA will prioritize the outcomes of the team's actions. They are concerned that the rules intended to bring the cars closer together have actually had the opposite effect, especially at the front of the field. While they won't turn a blind eye to overspending, they are unlikely to impose severe punishments on teams that are trying to improve the competitiveness of the sport. As politicians, they understand that appearances matter more than just the facts. Verstappen is currently in the best years of his racing career. His exceptional talent is a significant factor in the gap between his Red Bull Racing RBR car and the rest of the field. It's worth noting that the other RBR car does not have the same level of performance. Additionally, the cost cap implemented in Formula 1 will gradually have an impact over several seasons. If you observe qualifying sessions, you'll see that the cars are now closer in terms of performance compared to the previous season. This is a gradual process of narrowing the performance gaps among the teams. This approach is necessary because some teams had bigger advantages than others when the cost cap was introduced. It takes time to reduce and eliminate those advantages. The cost cap is the most effective way to create a more level playing field, although it should be noted that it should not turn Formula 1 into a standardized racing series. Personnel movements between teams can also have an impact, but when the teams require garden leave for key personnel, the effects on performance will be slower to materialize on the track. As each subsequent season passes, the effects of the cost cap rule will become more evident. However, it's clear to note that employing both Verstappen and Newey seems to be a challenging combination to beat, as they work together exceptionally well. Time will show if Mercedes can repeat the great Spanish GP performance in the Canadian GP. However, Mercedes team principal Wolff wants to manage expectations and downplays the chances of a similar outcome in Montreal. Wolff acknowledges that the result in Spain was a rewarding outcome for the team's hard work in developing and bringing the upgrade package to the track. It serves as a new starting point for further progress. However, he cautions that the Spanish circuit was favorable to Mercedes' car, and they should anticipate stronger competition from their rivals in the upcoming races. The gap to Red Bull remains substantial, and closing that gap will require extensive effort. Nevertheless, he says the team is ready to face the challenge. Moving on to Montreal, Wolff expects the track's characteristics, such as long straights and low-speed corners, to be less suited to their car compared to Barcelona. Regardless of the car's true pace at the Canadian Grand Prix, Mercedes aims to maximize their performance and achieve the best possible result. The unique characteristics of the circuit will also provide valuable insights into the performance of the W14 car, contributing to the team's ongoing development efforts. The weather in Montreal can be unpredictable, adding excitement to the upcoming race. In the previous year, Ferrari showed strong performance in Canada, with Carlos Sainz finishing second, just 0.9 seconds behind Verstappen. It will be interesting to see if Ferrari can secure a podium position again. If they are unable to do so, it would indicate that they have lost ground compared to last year. Considering that we are 1/3 into the season, it is not a one-time occurrence or a matter of track conditions or starting with a basic car. By this point, teams should have a good understanding of their car and how to optimize its setup for the race. If they are still struggling at this stage, it suggests that there are deeper issues with their car concept that need to be addressed. This video explored the thrilling clash between Mercedes and Red Bull in Formula 1, shedding light on their recent performances and perspectives. Share your thoughts in the comments below.